One mission, one heart. Across the stars they stood together, far beyond the moon, far beyond the edges of known travel routes. Something called out into the dark. It was not a voice and not a song. It was a pattern, steady and repeating, like a heartbeat made of light. It crossed empty space for years until it reached a small blue world that still believed it was alone. The signal arrived at Earth without warning. At first it was dismissed as noise. Space was full of strange sounds and broken echoes. But this one did not fade. It repeated every 12 hours, always the same, always clear. Scientists noticed that the signal carried structure, meaning, and intent. It was not random. Someone or something was reaching out. When the truth became clear, the world changed. The signal was not a greeting. It was a warning. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in a quiet room filled with soft lights and silent machines, a group of people gathered around a long table. Screens floated in the air, showing stars, numbers, and moving lines of data. Faces were tired. No one smiled. The message had been decoded. It spoke of a distant system, far beyond human reach. Worlds were falling apart. Stars were unstable. Fleets had vanished. A force was moving through space, not fast, not loud, but unstoppable. The message did not ask for help kindly. It begged. If no one answered, everything would end. Many leaders argued that it was a trap. Others said it was not Earth's problem. Humans had only just begun to travel between stars. They were not ready to fight unknown powers. Sending a ship that far would be a one-way journey. There would be no rescue, no return. But the signal kept repeating. And one question refused to go away. If humans did nothing, and the message was real, could they live with that choice? The decision was made in silence. One ship would go. It would not be the largest ship or the strongest. It would be fast, flexible, and built for survival. It would carry people who understood risk, loss, and hope. Not heroes, not legends. Just humans willing to stand where no one else would. The ship was named Dawnpath. On the day of launch, the sky above the spaceport was clear. Families stood behind glass walls. Some cried, some stood still, unable to speak. The crew walked toward the ship slowly, each step heavy with meaning. Among them was a quiet man with dark eyes and steady hands. He had spent his life fixing machines others had given up on. He trusted systems, but more than that, he trusted people. He looked at the ship like an old friend and placed a hand on its hull. Nearby, a woman watched the stars through a narrow window. She had trained for deep space travel since she was young. She knew the dangers better than most. Still, her heart beat fast. Not from fear, but from knowing this moment would never come again. The rest of the crew moved with calm purpose. A pilot who flew by instinct rather than rules. A medic who believed no life was too strange to save. A navigator who could picture space like a living map. Different people, different paths, one shared mission. When the engines ignited, the ground shook. Dawnpath rose into the sky, cutting through clouds, leaving Earth behind. No one knew if they would ever see it again. The journey began quietly. Space stretched out in endless black and silver. Stars drifted past like distant fires. Days passed, then weeks. The crew settled into routines, checking systems, sharing meals, telling small stories about home. Laughter came easily at first, then less often. The signal guided them forward. It pulled them beyond known space, beyond charts and safe paths. The ship's systems worked harder as strange forces pressed against its shields. Sensors showed empty regions where stars should have been. Darkness here felt thick, heavy, wrong. Then the signal changed. Without warning, its rhythm broke. The steady pattern turned sharp and urgent. New data flooded the screens. The navigator froze, hands hovering above controls. "This was not in the original message," she said softly. The warning was clear now. They were not alone. Something had noticed them. The ship's lights dimmed for a moment as power shifted. Long-range sensors detected movement, slow but massive, drifting just beyond range. No shape. No clear reading. Just presence. The pilot tightened his grip. "That thing has been following us." No one spoke. They had expected danger at their destination, not on the way. As Dawnpath pushed forward, space itself seemed to bend. Stars twisted. Time felt uneven. The crew grew tired faster. Dreams became strange and vivid. Some woke with the feeling of being watched, even inside sealed rooms. Then they arrived. The distant system filled the main screen, and silence fell over the bridge. Planets were broken. One world was split in half, its core exposed like a wound. Another drifted without light, its surface burned and empty. Wreckage filled space, ships of many designs, many sizes, frozen in place as if time had stopped. No signs of battle. No explosions, just quiet destruction. This wasn't war, the medic whispered. This was erasure. As Dawn Path moved deeper, they detected life signs. Weak, scattered. Small ships hid among debris, damaged and afraid. Some sent signals, others stayed silent, too scared to hope. The crew made a choice without voting. They would help. As rescue beams pulled survivors aboard, the crew saw beings they had only imagined. Tall, short, scaled, smooth, glowing, shadowed, eyes filled with fear and disbelief. Humans were not what these survivors expected. Some flinched, some stared, some wept. One survivor spoke through a translator device, its voice shaking. We thought no one would come. Before anyone could answer, alarms screamed. The sensors flared. The presence returned closer now. Space rippled as something vast shifted nearby. Not a ship, not a creature, something else. The enemy had found them. The ship shook as invisible force pressed against its shields. Systems failed and restarted. Lights flickered. The crew moved fast, shouting, fixing, adapting. They did not panic. They worked together. The pilot took Dawn Path into a dangerous maneuver, sliding between wreckage using broken ships as cover. The engineer rerouted power by hand, burning his palms. The navigator recalculated paths in seconds, her voice calm despite the chaos. The enemy did not attack directly. It observed. Pressure built. The hull groaned. The presence felt closer, heavier, as if judging them. Then, suddenly, it pulled back. The force vanished as quickly as it came. Silence returned, deeper than before. No one cheered. They knew this was not victory. It was curiosity. On the bridge, the quiet man looked at the stars ahead and spoke for the first time since the attack. It let us live. The truth settled over them like cold air. This mission was no longer just about answering a call. They had been seen. And whatever waited in the dark now knew that humans had arrived. The system they entered was darker than anything humans had ever known. Even the stars felt distant, their light struggling to reach the ruined worlds. Dawn Path drifted carefully, scanning each planet, each wreck, each shadow. The survivors they had rescued clung to hope, but fear ran in their veins like cold fire. Every one of them had lost everything, their homes, families, and futures, and now they looked to humans as their only chance. The first planet they visited was little more than rubble. Cities had been torn apart, leaving nothing but twisted metal and burned stone. A few pockets of life remained, hiding in tunnels or broken buildings. The crew worked quickly, coordinating with the survivors to find and rescue those they could. The humans did not speak of heroism or glory. They simply moved, doing what needed to be done. Each rescued being added weight to the ship, but also strengthened the bonds forming between the humans and their new allies. While they worked, sensors caught unusual readings. Shadows moved in ways that did not belong to any known species or technology. The navigator traced the signals, and the pilot adjusted the ship's path. The crew quickly learned the enemy did not attack in conventional ways. It moved silently, unseen, striking only when it could break the will of those it targeted. The survivors told stories of entire fleets vanishing, entire planets emptied, without a shot fired. The humans realized they were entering a war unlike any Earth had prepared for. Tensions ran high aboard Dawn Path. Some of the survivors did not trust humans, accusing them of being reckless, too young, too fragile to survive the unknown. But the humans did not falter. They spoke little but acted decisively. The engineer repaired damaged life support units, the medic cared for the weak, and the pilot guided the ship through asteroid fields and debris. Every day brought a new danger, and every day humans proved they could face it together. A sudden alert shook the crew. Long-range sensors had detected a fleet, small, fast ships of alien design emerging from the void. They did not attack immediately, but circled, observing. The crew realized the enemy's strategy: intimidation, disruption, fear. The fleet was not there to destroy them yet. It was there to test them, to see how humans would react under pressure. The survivors whispered among themselves, amazed that humans did not panic. They watched the humans adapt, using skill and teamwork rather than brute force, and slowly began to believe. The humans decided to strike first. Using stealth and speed, they moved toward a small convoy of enemy ships that had been cutting off escape routes for survivors on another planet. The humans had no way of knowing if the attack would succeed, but they relied on instinct, coordination, and the unpredictable nature of human thinking. The plan was risky, but it worked. The convoy was disrupted, allowing many to escape. The humans celebrated quietly, knowing that victory was small but significant. The survivors looked on in awe, realizing that humans fought not because they sought glory, but because they could not abandon others. In the aftermath, the crew discovered something unexpected. The enemy, despite its power, seemed unsettled by the humans' actions. Other species had always fought logically, systematically, without emotion. Humans, however, acted unpredictably, combining strategy with intuition, fear with courage, calculation with heart. The enemy did not understand this. It had never faced beings willing to risk everything for the sake of others. A whisper of hope spread among the survivors and the crew alike. Perhaps humans were the key to resisting the darkness. As Dawnpath continued its journey, the crew faced growing challenges. Supply lines were stretched thin. Systems failed at critical moments. The survivors carried their own fears and traumas, sometimes clashing with the humans or each other. Yet, the humans never wavered. They shared stories to comfort the frightened, repaired damaged vessels to give hope, and maintained a steady resolve that inspired those around them. The bonds forming aboard the ship grew stronger with each passing day. Humans and survivors learned from one another, combining knowledge and instinct in ways that were new and powerful. One night, while the crew rested, the enemy struck. It did not appear directly. Instead, it targeted the systems of Dawnpath, causing sudden blackouts and strange malfunctions. The ship shuddered violently, throwing the crew against walls and consoles. Alarms rang. The survivors panicked, some screaming, some frozen with fear. Humans acted instantly. The engineer climbed into the maintenance shafts, working with bare hands to reroute power. The pilot stabilized the ship with impossible maneuvers, and the navigator recalculated trajectories to avoid invisible dangers. The medic tended to the injured, keeping fear from spreading. The attack was brief, but the message was clear. The enemy was testing them, probing their limits, and watching every reaction. The crew realized something vital. This enemy, though powerful and mysterious, had weaknesses. It feared unpredictability. It feared unity. It feared resolve. Where other species relied on rigid logic and strategy, humans relied on instinct, courage, and connection. The enemy could destroy individual humans, but it could not destroy what they represented: the bond between beings, the determination to survive, and the refusal to abandon those in need. The revelation brought hope, but also a new burden. The humans now understood that their choices mattered more than ever, not just for themselves, but for every life they touched in the system. The survivors began to see humans differently. They had once viewed them as fragile, inexperienced, even naive. Now, they saw humans as leaders, not because of rank or power, but because of action and heart. The humans did not command with authority, they inspired with presence, decisiveness, and compassion. The survivors began to trust, to fight alongside, and to rely on them. An alliance was forming, fragile but real. Together they were beginning to understand that survival in this system depended not on strength alone, but on cooperation, courage, and shared purpose. In the days that followed, Dawnpath moved from world to world, rescuing survivors, repairing damage, and gathering intelligence. Each planet revealed new horrors, but also new lessons. Humans learned how to navigate unknown territories, how to predict the enemy's moves, and how to protect the vulnerable. The survivors learned to fight with humans, to adapt quickly, and to trust instincts that logic alone could not explain. Slowly, the humans and their allies became more than a crew and a group of refugees. They became a team, a force capable of facing the darkness. And yet, the threat always lingered. The enemy did not strike openly, but its presence was constant. Shadows moved at the edge of sensors, signals flickered with interference. Communications sometimes carried whispers that no one could explain. It was as if the darkness itself were alive, studying them, waiting for a mistake. The crew felt it, a heavy weight on their minds and hearts, but instead of fear, it strengthened their resolve. They knew they were being watched, but they also knew that humans did not back down. They acted, they adapted, and they survived. The enemy could observe, but it had yet to understand the full measure of human determination. One night, the navigator called an emergency meeting. The readings from a distant planet showed massive energy fluctuations. The crew examined the data and realized the signals were not natural. They were deliberate, like warnings or traps. Yet, no conventional enemy fleet was detected. The planet was alive with something hidden, something intelligent. It was a test, a challenge. The humans debated, argued, and finally decided to act. They could not ignore it. Their mission was to help, to protect, and to face the unknown, no matter the danger. As they approached the planet, the shadows shifted again. Dawnpath's sensors flickered, and the crew felt the familiar pressure of unseen eyes. The enemy was near, but this time, the humans were ready. They had learned to trust one another, to act as one, and to use fear as fuel rather than a chain. The ship descended toward the surface, and the humans braced themselves. Whatever awaited them, they would meet it together. The bond they had formed was their shield. Their courage was their weapon. Their unity was stronger than anything the darkness could imagine. The planet below was broken, but life still stirred. From the shadows came signals of other survivors, other beings, waiting for rescue. The crew prepared to act, knowing the enemy could strike at any moment. The humans moved swiftly, each action precise, yet guided by instinct and care. They rescued, they repaired, they healed. The enemy watched but did not intervene directly. Humans were unpredictable, and every choice they made challenged the enemy's expectations. Slowly, the humans began to understand the most important lesson of all. In this vast and hostile galaxy, survival depended not on power alone, but on the courage to stand together, no matter the odds. And so, in the dark between stars, the humans continued. Each day brought danger, but also hope. Each rescue brought lives saved, but also new burdens. Each shadow reminded them of the enemy, but also of their strength. They were alone in a strange system, yet not helpless. With every action, every choice, they showed the universe what humanity could be. They were small, yes, but fierce. They were fragile, yes, but unyielding. And they were together, facing a darkness that had never met a force like them before. The enemy had begun to notice. It had begun to fear. And the humans did not yet know how far they could reach. The stars ahead were distant and cold, but for the crew of Dawnpath, every light was a guide, a point to aim for, a small promise in a universe that had forgotten hope. After weeks of rescue and travel, the humans and their allied survivors had grown close, forming bonds that went beyond language or species. They shared meals, stories, and fears. They laughed quietly in moments of relief, and they cried together in moments of sorrow. Every small act of kindness became a weapon stronger than any shield or laser. Humanity's strength was not in its technology, but in its heart. The planet they approached now was scarred, but life still clung stubbornly to its surface. Forests had been stripped bare in some places, rivers boiled dry, cities reduced to rubble. Yet the reading showed movement, small pockets of survivors hiding in tunnels, caves, and makeshift shelters. The humans and their allies landed carefully, sending teams out to search. The ground trembled beneath them, as if the planet itself was weary from the destruction that had passed through it. Each step the humans took was deliberate, cautious, yet fearless. They moved not just to rescue, but to protect the dignity of those who had survived unimaginable horrors. As the teams spread out, the humans learned quickly that this system did not operate like their homeworlds. Creatures they had never seen before skulked in shadows. Machines of alien design hummed and clicked, some active, some dormant. Wreckage hid danger as easily as shelter. Every move could trigger disaster, yet the humans adapted. They used instinct as much as skill, watching patterns, anticipating threats, and moving in ways the enemy could not predict. The survivors followed, hesitant at first, but gradually learning that human courage was contagious. They began to act with confidence, knowing that the humans would not abandon them. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. Sensors detected massive energy readings from beneath the surface. A large alien machine had activated, its purpose unclear, but its power undeniable. The teams froze, watching as walls shook and dust fell from ceilings. The humans reacted instinctively. The engineer pulled a small device from his pack and started a manual override, while the pilot guided the nearest vehicles to shield the teams from falling debris. The medic shouted instructions to keep the wounded calm, while the navigator mapped the energy readings in real time. Every move was precise, every decision critical, yet it was instinct and trust that guided them more than any manual or plan. The machine suddenly moved. It was enormous, unlike anything humans had ever built, yet clearly designed for some intelligent purpose. It did not attack immediately. Instead, it scanned as if studying the humans, measuring them, judging them. The survivors whispered fears of annihilation, but the humans stayed steady. They had seen fear before, but they had also seen what courage could do. They advanced slowly, using shields, debris, and clever maneuvers to avoid the machine's sensors while still moving forward. Every small success bolstered confidence, not just for themselves, but for the survivors who now watched them with wide eyes. Then, the enemy spoke. not with words, but through a wave of pressure that rattled the ground and twisted sensors. It mocked them. It had seen countless species crumble under its presence. It had destroyed fleets, worlds, and civilizations with ease. And now, it saw humans. Fragile, inexperienced, short-lived. It assumed the humans would follow the same path. But humans were not like the others. They did not fight with logic alone. They fought with heart, with intuition, with a willingness to risk everything for the sake of others. This unpredictability unsettled the enemy. It had never been challenged this way before. The humans responded, not with arrogance or fury, but with action. They coordinated a strike against the machine, combining tactics learned from observation, knowledge from the survivors, and the unpredictable creativity of human thought. Explosions rang out as controlled detonations disrupted the machine's systems. The enemy tried to adapt, but it was slow. The humans moved faster, shifting strategies with each change. The machine faltered, miscalculating human intent, unable to respond to instinct-driven decisions. When the last of the controls were overridden, the machine fell silent. The humans did not cheer. They were not victorious yet. They had survived, yes, but the presence in the darkness was still out there, watching. The rescued survivors began to speak differently of humans. Where they had once doubted, they now respected. Where they had feared, they now trusted. Humans did not rely on weapons alone. They did not rely on logic or fear. They relied on courage, adaptability, and care. Other species had fought with precision, following plans like machines themselves. Humans acted in unpredictable ways, combining thought with emotion, reason with instinct. The enemy had begun to take notice. It had begun to fear. The next planet presented a different challenge. It was covered in dense storms, its surface barely visible through thick clouds and violent winds. The readings showed survivors trapped in abandoned stations, exposed to dangerous energy storms. Dawnpath hovered above, careful not to provoke the enemy, while the humans prepared for the rescue. Each movement required precise timing, understanding of the storms, and courage that refused to hesitate. The engineer recalibrated sensors to account for interference, the pilot maneuvered through violent winds, and the medic organized safety protocols. Humans acted not because the plan guaranteed success, but because the moment demanded courage. During the operation, the enemy struck again, not directly, but by manipulating the storms themselves. Electrical discharges followed the humans, debris moved in unnatural patterns, and communication systems fluctuated wildly. The survivors panicked. The humans adapted. They adjusted shields, rerouted power, and used instinct to guide every decision. The enemy expected chaos to break them. Instead, it revealed their strength. Humans thrived under pressure, turning danger into opportunity. They rescued all survivors on the station, but not without cost. Equipment was damaged, and a few humans were injured. Still, the crew pressed on, tending wounds, repairing systems, and comforting those who had faced terror and survived. In the quiet that followed, the humans and their allies gathered to review what they had learned. They realized that the enemy's greatest strength, its silence, unpredictability, and power, was also its greatest weakness. It could destroy bodies, but it could not destroy resolve. It could erase cities, but it could not erase courage. It could frighten, but it could not break hearts united in purpose. The crew understood something vital. This was no ordinary war. It was not about weapons or numbers. It was about spirit. It was about standing together when all else seemed lost. A small celebration followed, quiet but meaningful. Humans and survivors shared stories around simple meals, recounting moments when courage had turned danger into safety. The navigator laughed as a young survivor described a daring escape through rubble. The pilot smiled at the engineer's clever improvisation. The medic quietly wiped tears from the eyes of those too exhausted to notice. Bonds strengthened, not just through survival, but through shared humanity and trust. They were learning from one another, shaping a force stronger than any machine, any strategy, or any enemy. Yet, danger always lingered. Sensors continued to detect unusual readings, energy patterns that suggested the enemy was nearby, watching, studying. Humans spoke little of fear, but they were aware. They knew this was only the beginning. The enemy would strike again, and the stakes would rise. But they also knew something else. Humans had something the enemy did not anticipate. They had heart, unpredictability, courage, and unity. Together they were more than survival. They were resistance. As Dawnpath moved toward the next planet, the crew felt a strange calm. They knew the enemy was near, but they also knew the humans were ready. They had adapted, learned, and grown. Each rescue, each decision, Each risk had forged something invisible yet powerful: trust, unity, and courage. The enemy could destroy fleets, but it could not destroy that. Humans were small, yes, fragile, yes, but they were fierce, and together with those who had survived the darkness, they could face whatever awaited them next. The stars stretched endlessly before them, distant yet bright. The mission continued, not for glory, but for survival, hope, and the protection of those who could not protect themselves. The humans understood now what made them different, what gave them strength, and why the universe had taken notice. They were not the largest, not the strongest, not the fastest, but they were human, and that in this silent, dark system was enough to make a difference. The enemy had spoken, it had tested, it had mocked. And the humans had survived, adapted, and acted in ways no one expected. The galaxy was beginning to notice. Humans were no longer small and fragile. They were unpredictable, unyielding, and united. And somewhere in the shadows, the enemy realized that it had met something it had never faced before. Dawnpath and its crew moved forward, ready for the next challenge, ready to face the darkness together. They were human, they were united, and they would not turn away. The stars around Dawnpath felt closer now, not in distance, but in weight. Every light seemed to watch them as the ship moved deeper into the broken system. The crew had learned to live with that feeling. Fear no longer stopped them. It sharpened them. Enemy had not attacked openly since the last rescue, but its presence was everywhere. Sensors picked up strange waves that bent signals and twisted readings. Sometimes voices echoed through empty corridors, soft and familiar, calling names from Earth. The crew knew better than to follow them. They had learned that the enemy liked to test the mind before breaking the body. The survivors aboard Dawnpath had grown quieter. They no longer cried openly. Instead, they watched the humans closely, studying how they moved, how they spoke, how they faced danger without breaking apart. Humans were strange to them. Humans rested when they could, but when action was needed, they moved without delay. They argued, yes, but never when lives were at stake. When the moment came, they stood together. A new signal appeared on the main screen. It was weak and unstable, coming from near a dying star. The navigator traced its source and felt a chill run through her. Several ships were trapped there, not destroyed, but held in place by some force. Life signs were fading fast. "This is a trap," the pilot said quietly. Everyone knew it was true. If the enemy wanted to crush him, this was the place. A dying star, broken gravity, unstable space. There would be no easy escape. Still, the decision came fast. They would go. Dawnpath adjusted course and moved toward the dying star. As they approached, space began to tear in strange ways. Light stretched and bent. Time felt slow, then fast. The ship groaned under pressure, but the engineer kept it together through constant adjustments. His hands shook from exhaustion, but he did not stop. The trapped ships came into view. They were arranged in a wide arc, frozen in place as if caught in invisible chains. Different designs, different species. Some were military, others civilian. All were dying. As soon as Dawnpath entered the zone, the enemy reacted. Space itself seemed to tighten. Gravity shifted violently, pulling at the ship from several directions at once. Alarms screamed. The hull screamed louder. Survivors screamed too, their old fears rushing back all at once. The humans did not scream. They moved. The pilot fought the controls with full force, guiding the ship through twisting gravity wells. The navigator called out safe paths that barely existed. The engineer rerouted power again and again, sacrificing comfort systems to keep shields alive. The medic strapped herself into place and shouted calm words to anyone who could hear her. Outside, the enemy revealed itself more clearly than before. It did not have a single shape. It was like a vast shadow made of broken light stretching across space near the star. Parts of it moved like waves. Other parts stayed still, watching. It did not rush. It did not need to. It spoke again, not with sound, but with pressure and thought. It told them they were foolish. It told them unity was weakness. It told them emotion would destroy them. The humans felt the weight of those words push into their minds, searching for cracks. Memories of loss rose, faces of loved ones. Earth far away and helpless. For a moment, doubt crept in. Then the quiet man spoke. Not loudly, not angrily. "Hold on," he said. Just 2 words, but they carried everything. The crew held on to controls, to each other, to purpose. The survivors felt it too, that simple refusal to break. Some of them joined hands without thinking. Others whispered prayers in their own ways. The pressure increased, but the enemy hesitated. It did not understand this. The The humans launched rescue pods. Each pod carried mixed teams, humans and survivors together. They flew through unstable space toward the trapped ships. Every second was a gamble. Some pods nearly vanished into twisted gravity, but pilots adjusted at the last moment, guided by instinct more than data. On the trapped ships, panic ruled. Power was gone. Life support was failing. Crews had been waiting for death. Then humans arrived. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, as help. They cut through holes, shared air, carried the weak. They worked fast and spoke simply. No speeches. No promises they could not keep. Just action. The enemy reacted with anger. A wave of force slammed into the rescue zone. One pod spun out of control, its engines failing. Inside, a human pilot fought to regain stability while a survivor clung to the seat behind him. Dawnpath's pilot did not hesitate. He pushed the ship beyond safe limits and dove into the wave, using Dawnpath's mast to shield the pod. The hull cracked. Systems failed. Pain flashed across the bridge. But the pod survived. The enemy recoiled. It had not expected that. Another wave came, stronger this time. The dying star flared violently, sending bursts of energy through space. Time felt broken. The crew struggled to breathe. Some collapsed, overwhelmed by the pressure. Still, they did not stop. The last trapped ship was cleared, just as the enemy focused its full attention on Dawnpath. Space around the ship collapsed inward, crushing shields, tearing metal. The engineer screamed in pain as a surge burned through the controls. The medic dragged him away and took his place without knowing half the systems. She trusted the others to guide her. The navigator's voice cracked as she shouted a final escape path, narrow and unstable. The pilot followed it without question. Dawnpath burned its engines harder than ever before. For a moment, it felt like everything would end. Then they were free. The ship burst out of the gravity trap, tumbling into safer space. The enemy's shadow lingered near the dying star, stretched thin, unstable. It did not follow. Silence fell. On the bridge, several crew members lay injured. Systems flickered weakly. The ship was scarred and broken in places, but it was alive. The survivors rescued from the trapped ships filled every available space aboard Dawnpath and the Allied vessels that followed them. They stared at the humans with something new in their eyes. Not fear, not disbelief. Respect. Later, as repairs began and the wounded were treated, the survivors gathered quietly. They spoke among themselves, sharing what they had seen. Humans had faced the enemy directly and chosen others over themselves. They had broken rules of survival that other species followed without question. They had acted from the heart. That night the enemy spoke again, faintly, distantly. Not mocking this time. Confused. It had destroyed worlds through fear and isolation. It had erased civilizations by breaking their bonds. But humans did not weaken when together. They grew stronger. This truth unsettled it. On Dawnpath, the crew rested where they could. Some slept sitting up. Some stared at the stars. Some held hands, human and non-human alike, sharing silent understanding. They knew this battle was only one step. The enemy had not been defeated. But something had changed. The humans had proven that even against a force that bent stars in space, unity could hold. Emotion could endure. Choice could matter. One mission had become more than rescue. It had become a stand. And across the stars, the enemy began to prepare, not just to destroy humanity, but to understand them. Because for the first time in its long existence, it had felt something new. Uncertainty. Dawnpath drifted through quiet space, damaged but alive. The dying star was far behind them now, yet its weight still pressed on every mind aboard the ship. Repairs were slow, power was limited. Many systems worked only part of the time. Still, the ship moved forward, guided by will as much as engines. The rescued ships followed in a loose formation. They were patched together, filled beyond safe limits, but everyone carried lives that would have been lost. No one complained. No one asked why humans had come. They already knew. Inside Dawnpath, the crew moved carefully. Injuries were treated with simple tools and steady hands. The medic worked without rest, helped by survivors who had learned quickly. Pain was everywhere, but so was purpose. Each small repair, each bandage, each shared meal became a quiet act of resistance. Then the truth began to surface. The navigator noticed patterns in the enemy's movements. It did not strike randomly. It avoided certain regions of space, especially those filled with strong emotional signals, places where many lives gathered together. The engineer noticed something else. The enemy reacted more strongly when humans were involved directly, especially when humans made sacrifices. The enemy was not just watching them, it was learning. or trying to. A council formed aboard Dawnpath. Not formal, not official. Humans and survivors gathered in a wide cargo space, sitting on crates, floors, walls, different shapes, different voices, one shared fear. The navigator explained what they had found using simple words. The enemy was not just a weapon or force. It was designed with a purpose. Long ago, before humans had ever left Earth, the enemy had been created. It had one goal: to remove emotion from the universe. Civilizations before had believed emotion caused war, chaos, and destruction. They had built the enemy to erase feeling, to create a silent, controlled galaxy. At first it had worked. Worlds became calm. Conflict faded, then life faded too. Without emotion, beings lost purpose. They stopped creating. They stopped caring. The enemy had continued its task, unable to change, unable to stop. It erased more and more, believing it was saving the universe. Humans were different. Humans were built on emotion. Love, fear, anger, hope. These were not weaknesses for them. They were fuel. And the enemy could not erase that. A heavy silence filled the room. The question everyone feared was finally spoken. How do we stop it? The answer was worse. The enemy could not be destroyed by weapons. It existed across space and time, connected to itself in ways machines could not reach. But there was one way to stop it. It could be changed. To do that, a living mind would have to connect directly to its core, not through machines alone, but through emotion, through memory, through choice. The cost was clear. Whoever connected might not survive. The room erupted in voices. Survivors protested. Humans argued. No one wanted this. No one wanted to choose who would die. The quiet man stood slowly. He had not spoken much since the mission began. He was not a leader by rank, not a hero by design. He simply understood machines, systems, and people. I can do it, he said. The room went silent again. The medic stood up at once, her voice shaking. No, we will find another way. There is no other way, the navigator said softly. The quiet man looked around the room. This is why we came, he said. Not to win, to stop the loss. Others stepped forward too. The pilot, another engineer. Even a survivor offered themselves. That made it worse. In the end, the decision was not made by command or vote. It was made by understanding. The quiet man was the best choice. He understood systems deeply. He had the strongest emotional control, not because he felt less, but because he carried feeling without being ruled by it. Before anyone could stop him, he placed a hand on the wall of the ship. I am not alone, he said. None of us are. Preparation began. A small chamber near the core of Dawnpath was rebuilt. Cables were rerouted, interfaces redesigned. The ship would act as a bridge, not a weapon. Survivors helped without question, their hands shaking but steady. As the work continued, the enemy stirred. It felt the change. Pressure returned, stronger than before. Space twisted again. The enemy reached out, not in anger, but in warning. It told them to stop. It told them emotion would destroy everything. Humans did not answer with words. They answered with action. Dawnpath moved toward the center of the system, where the enemy's presence was strongest. Allied ships formed a protective ring, ready to give their lives if needed. Inside the chamber, the quiet man sat alone, cables connecting his mind to the interface. The medic stood nearby, tears on her face, refusing to leave. You don't have to be brave, she said. I know, he replied. I just have to be human. The connection began. At first, nothing happened. Then the enemy pushed back. Pain flooded the chamber. The quiet man screamed once, then went silent, focusing inward. The enemy poured images into his mind. Dead worlds, silent stars, civilizations erased. It showed him what emotion had done. He showed it something else. He showed it Earth. Small moments, a shared meal, a laugh after failure, a hand held in darkness. Fear faced together. Love that hurt but mattered. The enemy resisted. It tried to shut him out. But emotion does not obey commands. The quiet man's heart beat faster. His memory spilled into the enemy's core. Loss, yes, but also choice. Sacrifice chosen freely. Care without reason. The enemy began to fracture. Not break. Change. Outside the chamber, alarms screamed. Dawnpath shook violently. Allied ships were attacked by waves of force. Some were torn apart. Survivors cried out as friends vanished. Still, they held formation. Still, they stood together. Inside, the quiet man felt himself fading. His body weakened, his mind blurred. The enemy tried one last time to erase him. It failed. Because the enemy had never learned this truth. Emotion was not chaos. It was connection. The connection held. The pressure across the system eased suddenly. The enemy's presence flickered, unstable. Attacks stopped. Space calmed. Inside the chamber, the quiet man collapsed. The medic rushed forward, shouting for help. His heart was weak, but it was still beating. Across the system, something incredible happened. The enemy withdrew, not in fear, but in confusion. It no longer knew how to continue its mission. It had learned too much. On the bridge, the crew watched readings stabilize for the first time since arriving. Survivors across the fleet felt it too. The weight lifted. The silence softened. The enemy was not destroyed, but it was no longer the same. And neither were they. Dawnpath drifted onward, carrying scars, carrying loss, carrying hope. The quiet man lived, though changed. His eyes held depths no one could fully understand. The mission was not over, but the choice had been made. One heart had reached into the dark, and the universe had listened. Dawnpath moved slowly through quiet space. The systems had stabilized, but every part of the ship showed the battle it had endured. Scars of stress, cracks in metal, and burned circuits were reminders that the journey had not been easy. Survivors moved cautiously through the corridors, some helping with repairs, some still too exhausted to do more than sit and breathe. Humans walked among them, quiet but steady, tending to needs with care and patience. They were tired, yes, but they carried purpose stronger than fatigue. The enemy had withdrawn, but its presence lingered. It was no longer the force that had erased worlds without thought, but something different. Its core had been touched by human emotion, and it struggled to understand what it had felt. It had never encountered beings who chose courage and connection over self-preservation. That small seed of change had altered it, leaving uncertainty in place of dominance. The galaxy itself seemed quieter, as if space were holding its breath. The crew of Dawnpath did not celebrate. They had survived, yes, but the cost had been high. Ships were damaged, allies were lost, and the strain on every mind was clear. The quiet man, still weak from the connection to the enemy, moved slowly through the ship. He did not speak much. His thoughts were heavy, filled with the images he had shared, the lives he had seen, and the weight of hope he had carried. The medic followed him closely, ensuring that every small weakness was tended. Others watched him with respect, knowing that he had faced the impossible and returned alive. The survivors aboard the fleet were beginning to understand humans in a new way. They had seen fear, despair, and hopelessness in the system, yet the humans had not faltered. They had acted together, with intuition, heart, and courage. Where other species might have calculated risk and retreated, humans had faced danger to protect others. Every life saved, every decision made in the face of annihilation had shown something the enemy had never counted on: the strength of connection. As the fleet moved towards safer space, the navigator pointed out distant signals. Other worlds had begun to respond to the humans' presence. Signals of life, hope, and small communities that had survived the enemy's attacks flickered faintly across space. Humans had not merely survived, they had inspired. Their actions had shown that unity, compassion, and courage could exist even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. The survivors began to speak in quiet voices, sharing stories of the humans who had saved them, who had moved without hesitation, who had risked everything for strangers. The enemy lingered in the shadows, still learning, still uncertain. It no longer attacked openly, but it did not leave completely. Its presence was a reminder of danger, a test of vigilance, yet it had been changed in a way it could not understand. Connection, emotion, and choice had touched it, and that touch had altered its purpose. For the first time, it hesitated before acting, unable to destroy without understanding, and unable to move without fear of what the humans might do next. Dawnpath continued, moving through systems once abandoned, where worlds had been empty. Humans and survivors explored together, repairing, rebuilding, and offering aid. They restored life where they could. Some planets had entire communities living quietly, waiting for help they had not dared hope for. Humans offered what they could: food, medicine, tools, and most importantly, trust. They taught the survivors simple lessons about working together, planning for small successes, and protecting each other in ways the enemy could not predict. Every rescue and repair strengthened the bond among them. The survivors learned to trust human decisions. They followed instinct as much as orders, understanding that humans combined logic with intuition. They began to move with confidence, inspired by the quiet courage of the crew. The humans did not demand obedience or loyalty. They earned it through example, through sacrifice, and through steadfast action. In this way, the small fleet grew not just in numbers, but in unity and resolve. One day, as the fleet approached a bright, distant system, the quiet man stood at the observation deck, staring at the stars. He had been silent for days, recovering strength and processing what had happened. The medic joined him, offering a small smile. "They will remember," she said. "Who?" he asked. "Everyone," she replied. "The survivors, the people we saved, the enemy. They will remember what humans did." He nodded slowly. "It is not for us to be remembered. It is for them to have hope." The stars ahead shimmered like distant fires. Fleet moved steadily, carrying not just humans but the survivors of many worlds, all bound together by choice, courage, and care. The enemy remained in the shadows, uncertain, but the humans no longer feared it. They knew that connection could not be erased, that courage could not be destroyed, and that hearts acting together could face anything. In the quiet of the observation deck, the navigator joined them. "We have more to do," she said. "Other systems, other worlds, they need us." The quiet man turned. "Then we will go. Together." The fleet stretched across the void, small against the infinite stars, but powerful in ways no force could measure. Every rescued being, every repaired ship, every choice to act in the face of fear had created a new story in the galaxy. Humans had proven that strength was not in weapons or numbers, but in unity, courage, and the willingness to act for others. The enemy watched from a distance, uncertain and hesitant. It had met humans and been changed. It had been confronted not by force, but by heart. It had encountered something it could not destroy, something it could not ignore. Dawnpath moved forward, carrying life, hope, and courage. The fleet followed, scattered yet united, a single mission bound by one heart. Across the stars, the universe began to notice. Humans had arrived. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, but they were resilient. They acted together. They protected. They inspired. The quiet man watched the stars, feeling the weight of all they had done and all that was yet to come. He had touched the enemy's core and returned. He had felt despair and hope, loss and love, all in the same instant. He understood now what it meant to be human, and he knew that humanity's journey had only begun. The fleet approached a new system, filled with worlds that could be saved, lives that could be restored. Dawnpath led the way, carrying the crew, the survivors, and the quiet determination that had carried them through darkness. The enemy lingered in the shadows, changed but present, uncertain how to act. And across the stars, humans and their allies moved as one, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as guardians. One mission had become one heart. That heart had stood against the void, and now it stood across the galaxy, unbroken and unyielding. The universe was vast. The challenges ahead were countless. Yet for the first time, there was hope. Not a fragile hope, but a living one, carried by humans and their courage. They had survived, they had endured, and they had changed the course of the stars. Dawnpath and the fleet continued onward, together, carrying light into darkness, courage into fear, and life into a universe that had almost forgotten what it meant to hope. One mission had become one heart. Across the stars they stood together, and nothing could erase the bond they had forged.